to the Tough Fish Show. I am so excited to bring to you James McLamb. James, thank you so much for being on the show.
It's really an honor for me to be asked and to join you today. We've had so much fun before time. I can't even wait until we get into the meat of this conversation today.
Same here. I am so excited you're here. And I would love for you to start with how did you get into writing?
I had a friend that for years said that a book is your business card. And she said, you become an authority on working with youth. She said, you had years of teaching, you've years of speaking, years of leading programs and organizations that are related to youth. Why don't you write? But I pushed it back. I kept pushing it back. And I actually committed on a podcast episode, I don't know, maybe half a decade ago. Oh, I'm going to write and I'm going to publish it this coming year. And it didn't happen. And I had all these notes of everything that was happening. Well, about 2 or 3 years ago, a person reached out to me blindly on another project on LinkedIn, and we became friends. And I invited him on our show, Alex Dimchek, and I invited Alex to our show to speak on his latest book that he and John Gordon had all authored together. And so those two, he was sharing his story and all that. And then weeks afterwards, he said, I help people write books. Would you like to have a conversation? I was like, well, okay, I'll have a conversation with you. And then you could pretty much see where it went from there. The conversation went to, yes, let's partner together on this. They have their own publishing company there, and that started the ball rolling because there were some things that were fresh in my mind. There was some programs that we had just launched, and I'd spent a great deal of time researching this and creating what I thought was a very well developed program, and I had all these thoughts in there, and I needed to put it down somewhere. And so he and his partner Will just helped me in it out, and we worked on it together, and we published it.
I love that. And I am a fan of John Gordon. I think that his work is wonderful. And I love the fables in particular that he uses to really tell the story versus just simply be a leadership book or an org development book. It's really about teaching through storytelling. But I am curious, so that you're working with somebody who's helping you write your book, helping you get that out. How did you all work together? I mean, did you write the first draft and then they were basically coming behind you and editing and offering you insights to how to push deeper and how to make it a stronger story, or ask for an example of something? Or did they, or was it more joint type of writing where like you wrote a chapter, they wrote a chapter, and it was like a co-authored book? How did that work together?
Well, we had a discovery session together, which took, I think, about 3.5 hours, where we just fleshed out what my ideas was, where it was going, what my heart was saying, what I felt the direction of it was. And then based on that, Will, who is the co-founder of that organization, sent me what he thought was an outline based on it. I looked at it, changed a lot of things that did not work out. And then the process was very simply this. Every 2 weeks, we would meet together via Zoom. Well, actually, Google Meet, sorry. We would meet together and review what I had written the previous 2 weeks. I would upload it to a document in the cloud, in the Google Cloud, and they would review it. They would edit it. They would give me suggestions. I would point out points that I was having trouble with. Many times my comments to them were, hey, this chapter took off really well. I felt like we were flying and cruising at a great altitude, but I have no idea how to get this plane down on the ground. I just cannot land this chapter and keep it so that it transitions into the next one. Help me here. And they might give me something back that says, okay, here's a couple of things that we're thinking of. Here's some rewrites that we might consider. But it was more me driving the boat. There were two editors that worked with me on that, Will, and then one of their in-house staff editors. So they would take a look at things and reword it and say, okay, your language is changing here. Your tone is changing. It's not consistent because, as you know, writing, if it takes over a long period of time, your mind changes and it's hard to keep it in that same voice the entire time. So that was a process that I had to learn as well. And I'm glad that I had professional eyes to look at it, to make sure that they were taking a look at the content and making sure that it was who I was, and it was consistent, and it was something that could be read and understood and not look like it was just somebody's ramblings, which I believe that's what it would have been.
But what I'm hearing though, to your point, when you are writing a manuscript, like when I've worked on my own books, well, my own nonfiction books, let's say, my picture books are a different story. But with the two nonfiction books, literally they were kind of like downloads. Ideas would come and I would just write out whatever they were, but I never wrote the books in order. They were out
Mm-hmm.
of the chapters were, I might write chapter 10 today and chapter 2 tomorrow. And always I wrote the intro last, like it needed to be last so that I could better articulate the arc. You know, I knew the arc, but it would better set that up so that it really felt as strong as I wanted it to feel, knowing that the book was following that, but it really just was a nice way to kind of lead in. And I needed to do that last. But I could tell looking at, you know, if I wrote chapter 10 first and then I wrote chapter 3 last, chapter 3 sounded way better than chapter 10 to start. And so then
Exactly.
it was like going back and saying, okay, how do I strengthen it? How do I make these other chapters level up and move
Mm-hmm.
up to that piece? And is there something in some of these other chapters that really I needed to write them in order to keep going, but they needed to come out because they really weren't necessary after when you see the completed piece. So, you know, I like how you were describing that because as you're writing, you're getting guidance, you're getting feedback to help course correct as you need. But then when you saw the full manuscript, so this whole piece is done, and I'm assuming you probably were writing in order based upon what was going, because you were having other people look, and so this book is getting built chronologically.
It was
Okay.
I wrote in my own document, and then I would upload to the edible document. The edible sound like it was something you could eat. The the document that was edited, uh, I would upload it as I felt comfortable. So I had a lot more content than they were seeing,
Sure.
because sometimes when they would say this doesn't work in this chapter, or this point right here was made earlier, you might need to reword a different thing, it would help me then, redo everything. Because if I'd have just thrown it all up there, they said a lot of their writers would just write in the document as they go, and they would, kind of do it live as it's going on. I didn't feel comfortable doing that.
That's okay.
Because I just wanted to see a little bit more what was going on, and it allowed me to then to go back to the doc, and be able to say, hey guys, now that we're at chapter 6, let's go back to 2, where we introduce these concepts. And is this articulated the right way? Am I explaining it the right way there? Would you go back and take a look at that before we go forward with points 4 or 5 or whatever we were on that? So yes, they were seeing it in a sequence in that way, but my mess here in my home office was a lot different. I was, and it really evolved, Jen. The last half of the book was not in the original outline. It's just when
Oh,
I got through about halfway through it, I was like, this is going in a direction that I didn't anticipate. I need to add this aspect to it. Um,
I
I
love
need
that.
to. This issue's coming up, and I didn't see that as being a part of the process to begin with, and so if we don't address it, it's going to be hanging fruit that we should have been able to pull off and eat very easily. Let's just grab it.
Yeah.
So there were parts of it. The last 2 chapters, well, the next to the last chapter was totally something that we never saw coming and stuff. But it was a thing that Will said. You feels like you got to have something here to tie what you're doing to what's going on here. So
Yes, yes. But what I love is that that happened organically. Like as you were
mm-hmm.
writing, yes, you had a vision. Yes, you knew what the end result that you wanted to achieve would be. But you also were staying open to seeing what was coming up for you because that was also, it wasn't that you were going to miss the end goal. It was that you were allowing what else might be necessary that didn't present itself until it needed to. Because
Right.
if you had had that idea maybe at the very beginning, it also might have felt like, well, how am I going to get there? Or how does that even make sense? And it could feel easy to just put it aside versus just leaving it a part of the mix and then flushing it out later. But instead, you let it happen organically. And I love that. I love that so much.
Well, I also let my wife read it as I was writing, and she would say, "This doesn't sound like you," or "This is not going in a direction that is consistent with the messages that you speak on." There's just a little bit. It seems like she would make the comment, "It seems like you're influenced too much by the research that you're putting in here, and not enough from the heart that you're putting in here." So we would back off and, you know,
I love
try to readjust that, because I found it difficult for myself to be able to read it and see the big picture. I was reading the small details of it and couldn't see the big picture. So I'm glad we had these eyes. Um,
yeah.
I don't think I would have done very well at all by myself, in self-publishing and doing all the self-editing. I know lots of people love to do that, and I admire them. I really am envious of their dedication and skill. For me, I needed those extra eyes. I needed that input, that experience, someone to walk alongside me and coach me through the process.
But I love that because to me, it's more about the fact that you had a message, you had something that was important to you to share. You really wanted to, and a book was a great way to reach more people and help them just solve a problem or to have some inspiration or a mindset shift. This was a beautiful way to reach more people. And so, I mean, I do believe that a book takes a village. Even if
Mm-hmm.
you choose to self-publish, ideally, you're not doing your own editing. You have hired at least an editor for, your line and your copy. And sometimes people hire editors like me, which is for that structure, that big picture type of thing. But then not everybody does that. But in the same breath, having that editor, having somebody do a book cover for you, having someone do the interior layout, if you're doing an ebook, the ebook layout, all of those things are
Mm-hmm.
so necessary and they represent, to your point earlier about the book being a form of a business card. That is like music to my ears. That's exactly how I think too. And you want that business card then to look its best. So you want that interior layout of the book to look just as good, just as polished, and reflect the outside cover. You want that ebook to work smoothly and easily, just as much as you want that physical form to work. So
Exactly.
I love that you asked for help where you felt like you needed it, because then you were playing to your strengths and allowing others to play to their strengths to get an amazing output. Good for
And
you.
I was using the book as a companion to our premier program at Generation Youth. So it wasn't that I was promoting a book because I wanted to promote a book. This was going along with it. Now, what it has done is given birth to a desire to do other writing and
Aw.
other um, projects as well. Matter of fact, you briefly hit on it earlier, talking about a fable. That's funny you said it, because in the last week I sat down, I was talking to my wife. She was like, "Well, where are you at on this next book that you've outlined and stuff?" I'm like, I'm really considering just flipping the whole thing and doing it as a fable. What do you think? She said, "Well, that's going to be a different approach for you. Um, do you have an idea?" I says, I don't know. Just let me think through it and think how it can be structured so that it reaches the message I want to, but it doesn't look like I'm just taking someone else's format and doing a
Yeah.
plug and play, which I've seen so many folks do as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah. But I love that so much. One of my favorite fables, especially in the personal development leadership space, is Cotter's our iceberg is melting. And I mean, it's awesome. It has pictures even, and it had big
mm,
font, the book that I had. But what it was beautiful because it articulated change management, but it did it in a way that really helped to describe it and understand it and see it play out in a workspace, for instance, versus saying, here's the theoretical concept of it. Here's what this looks like, and here's what the
mm-hmm.
stages are. Instead, the stages, when you understand that staging, then you could see the story following suit because the story represented what you might see in everyday life or in your workspace or in a teaming environment. And so I loved that idea. I hope you do that. You heard it here first on this podcast that there might be a fable that comes. Ooh.
Well, I think there's opportunities there for people who love that world. We were talking about John Gordon earlier. He has created a whole universe in which many of his books that are fables have interconnected characters or no characters from a previous book. Hey, I learned this from this person. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, that was this book earlier. So you can see how they all tie together. And if you've read enough of him, you'll see the progression of his writing skills as well as he develops and reveals his concepts in more interesting ways and engaging ways with the audience. So,
but I love that you are interested in pushing that. And I feel that what happened is like you working with the team that you did, it
mm-hmm,
sounds as though they helped you to understand different parts of the writing process or the techniques that can go into writing. And therefore, how might you try that differently? Like following your curiosity and creativity and just saying like, what if I tried this? Well, I
mm-hmm.
can try it and see if it makes sense. I can try it and try this new direction. And I would rather try than not. So that's what I'm
Right.
hearing. I love that. I
Well,
love that.
I'm encouraged to do that. I really think that it might work that way. Again, the first book was more of a companion, more
Yeah.
sets, it explains what we're doing. Because we were working really on our certification programs and pouring our time into that, but we really didn't have something that that established us as the authority on it that people could have, that
Yeah.
people could use, that people could use as a resource. So, the book gave us that, and it was birthed out of all the mindset and the things that we were doing as we were creating our certification program. So
They work
they
together.
parallel each other. Yeah, very, very much so.
So I love
Um,
the fact that you said that though, that you have this program and that the book is a companion to it because
mhm,
what I really think is cool, and this is really applicable for, it doesn't really matter the genre. Even if you're writing, a high fantasy fiction novel, there are still ways that you can create companion material, companion
right,
courses, companion workshops, because there are other ways you can bring people into your world to learn about either the world you've built or the method in which you create your pieces. So there's so many ways, but I love the fact that what you're talking about is using books to amplify your business,
right.
using books to really grow a business and to see them as assets that can help you expand in different ways. Would you talk a little bit more about that? Like how you saw the companion of that and then kind of ways you were able to weave it in.
Well, I think of the way the book works. If we look at it as kind of a triangle or a tree, a factor tree, those things, our certification program was at the top. And then we needed several avenues in which to express that. Our podcast became an outlet for that. And a book just became another outlet for us to be able to spread this message so that people would go back to that. When I see a book like the fable idea that we're talking about, it would be kind of flip where the book is the top and then programs would come under it, maybe like a class or maybe a companion study guide, those types of things. And it would also fall under, it would have its own tree and it would fall under the bigger tree as well. Where this, I don't envision us, creating study guides because it is kind of the study guide of the
Yeah.
book,
Yeah.
the program that we have. So, and we're just trying to look at ways to amplify the message in big picture, and then also create things that are frankly have a good return on the investment. Because and I'm not talking always just about financial investment. I'm talking about your energy and your time
Yeah.
as well. This was well worth it.
I love that. I
The
love
time,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're talking about, so this book, so Tomorrow's Youth is a companion to a certification, to a program. But what was it like? So you've gotten this book together, you have hit publish, you're holding this physical book in your hand. So what was it like deploying it, really getting it into the hands of your readers, whether it was, I'm having a live workshop and it's a part of the ticket, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, to get in, or if I had a table afterwards and people purchased after, or however that was working for you. But what was that like? I mean, what kind of feedback did you get? How did you get the book into the hands of your readers?
Well, our initial approach was everyone who had come through the certification program received the book as a part of their certification. There was a lot of that. It was published last year in March and March of 23. I was late getting it out. They had a schedule of it coming out in the fall and some other things that another program came along. And so I was a little slower getting it out. And when it came out this, we had so much speaking engagements and stuff there. I was able to use that as a companion. And for several of the engagements, I just used the book as my ticket for them to speak. Okay, I'm speaking to this many people, then buy that many books and I'll come and speak for you.
Mhm.
And that way increase the book sales, increase the numbers, that kind of uh, analytics that you want to have when it comes to publishing. I thought that would be a good way to do it
Yeah.
as well. Maybe monetarily wise, I wasn't getting as much because of the cut on the publishing and all that, but I felt like the message was more important and have people out there was more important. I was able to sign every book before we gave it to them and put a flyer on the inside that gave them some insight on what the book was about, and also, hey, I have a request. Would you do this, this, and this? So it would help them, share it. And we did a little bit of social media promotion on that. If you take a picture of holding the book on there and you tag us in it, then we'll send you this stuff for free. Some more content that you have, and you'll be on the cutting edge, or you'll be the first person signed up for this summit. You won't have to worry about remembering to do it. So that helped a little bit.
Mhm.
I will freely admit that I did not do the heavy push that a lot of people do,
Yeah.
not because I was not proud of what we wrote. It was more the timing and the
Mhm.
purpose of it.
Mhm.
So we're something like a fable book coming up and stuff, that's part of the whole mindset of it too, is how do we get this out? Because we want to lead with this. We didn't want Tomorrow's Youth was not something we were leading with. It was, as we've said, the companion to something else that we were leading with. So I wanted to speak about the certification and then use this as the companion with it.
I love that. I really love what you're talking about too, because another thing that you're alluding to, or that I'm hearing, is that a book, once you hit publish, yes, ideally you'd love to see a lot of sales or a lot of pre-orders,
Mm-hmm.
and all that's great. But guess what? We're on a whole new journey. It's a marathon. Your book is out there, and every time you do a speaking engagement, every time you have something where that the book is an opportunity to talk about it, or you start adding more to your repertoire, you add more to that catalog of work. Once someone finds your book and they like it and they realize you have other pieces, they're more inclined to want to say, well, I need to read that too, because you're a part of that. And I love how you were describing that. The fact that too, that you mentioned that if the book was a part of the speaking engagement, that was the fee essentially
Mm-hmm.
to come speak. But what it also did, to your point, yeah, it might have helped the rankings in the publishing space and all. But the other thing that it did was that person left with something from
Right.
you, in addition to the experience that they had, because so many times those speaking engagements can potentially feel like I had a break, not a breakthrough. And you're creating an additional form of that breakthrough because you're saying, I'm going to create an awesome experience for you when we're together in this space, and you'll want to be able to apply it. And I'm giving you a resource to help you continue. And you're leaving with that with as you're going. It's not just about the fact that, we were present and we had this
Mm-hmm.
experience. It's also I'm giving you a way to continue and continue more into your world too. Because if the host hired you and they had a group, The group may or may not have been a part of your world yet.
Right.
So I love that. I love how you were showing other ways to get your book out and balancing what the priorities are and how to utilize that. Love
And
that.
to your point on it, not as part of your world yet, a quick story on that is that I trained a camp staff last summer for a camp that I worked with many years ago. I just volunteer my time to train the staff, but the director always wants to pay. I said, well, just buy books for your staff. So, he bought books. It wasn't many. I think there were maybe like 25 of them. It was just a day time. And I got to spend a day at camp and hang out at a place that meant a lot to me when I was younger. With this past fall, I get a call from someone who was there saying, hey, we're hosting a conference and we have 400 people in attendance at the conference. We want to know if we can buy your books and give them to each one of the participants as part of their package to come there. And I was like, well, no, I'm not going to, of course, when do you want them?
Right.
And they were like, well, yeah, if we go on Amazon, this is what they cost and stuff. I said, look, I can do much better than that, obviously. And I'll deliver them to you. 400 books, I'll go. Because it wasn't only an hour and a half for me, so it wasn't that big of a drive anyway. But that enabled me to reach a market and reach people that I never met before, who I will never see, who will never see me, who may, the analytics and all that kind of stuff logarithms may never get them to see my book pop up on any kind of feed at all. They may not have access to it. Now it's in the hands of 400 youth leaders in churches all across North Carolina and South Carolina. So that's a plus.
Yes, and it's a ripple effect too, because
Yes.
that group that came together and received the book, then you don't know where that will go. And that's the thing that I think authors need to keep sight of, is that every time somebody gets a hold of your book, yes, you wrote those words, but now the reader can continue the conversation. Maybe they go, have you read this book by James? You have to read it. Or, hey, do you think we could talk with him about doing something like this? Or how do we, get more of the books to do whatever? I mean, you don't know where that will go or how that might inspire someone. Maybe, if it's within a church setting, maybe there's a youth library within the church,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe your book is sitting there, and maybe your book's getting checked out. And maybe that is inspiring someone else to pursue a path that might feel brave to them because your book was accessible to them because you were willing to figure out creative ways to get it there. And I love that so much.
And it's so humbling when you realize that people are using your content that you're not going to know, that you're never going to be able to interact with in a personal way, and yet they're gleaning something from it. And that's one of the things I like about sometimes the analytics, that you can get to see where your sales are coming from. Because recently I saw that there was a dozen or so books, a little over a dozen books that were sold that apparently had been ordered from in Japan. And I'm like, was this a mistake? I mean, how did that happen? I mean, there's no way for me to track that down and see that, but it's just kind of just threw me off. I'm like, what caused that?
But the way I see that is that when you are honoring that message, which obviously you are, you have a strong message, it's coming through in this book. That's a beautiful demonstration of that ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if somebody listening might be in their head about whether they should continue working on that book, or maybe they're in their head after they've hit publish because they don't feel like they feel like they're looking at crickets.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to them?
Ooh, be patient. Your time will come on that. Wow, seeing crickets, that's a good point. And you see that for quite a while. You just don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. I did not do the book tables, the book signings. I have a guy interviewed on a podcast, and I see every week he's saying, "Oh, I'm at this college, or getting my books, having a book table at this bookstore." We had 6 people come up there, and I was, I called him and said, "How long are you there?" I was there 2 hours. 2 hours and six people. That's a little, but he's doing this over and over and over again. These
Mhm.
messages out. I didn't do all that, so I'm probably not the best on reaching that uh, regards. But I really think people should, if this is something they're passionate about in their heart, the message is going to find the right people and it's going to reach the right people. For us, it is a solid companion piece that when we're teaching the things, they actually can go and see. Okay, he did do research on this. There is actual evidence based on what he's talking about. That he does have stories to back up what he's saying. He's just not, some guy who thinks he knows what he's doing. There's some validity to what he says on this. So it establishes as a credibility. It, I publish research articles in graduate settings and in academic settings, but people don't want to read that stuff. I mean, people don't want to read that stuff. This is easier and easier to be digestible for people. So I think that's the impact it's had for me.
I think that's cool. And what I'm hearing is, just like you said, when you believe in that message and you want to keep talking about it, you'll find ways that feel good to you. So
Mm-hmm.
book signings didn't feel good to you. That wasn't your method. Your method might have been more, I like teaching, I like speaking. Well, speaking and teaching type activities are different than doing book signings and trade shows. Yet they are similar in that they're public facing, but they are different ways of still showing your message, just communicating your message, and you found what felt good and worked well for you and honored that and kept
Mm-hmm.
going with it. And I think that's awesome, James. This has been fantastic. Where can people connect with you? Where can they get your book? Where can they find out more about your program? And how do they get to be a part of your world if this fable happens?
Well, we have two different sites, but if they go to Generation Ziegler, Ziglar, generationziegler.com, that's where they're going to find most of the information from. Our organization was originally called that. And anyone who is known, even when you rebrand, it's tough to change URLs, but so it's still that URL. A secondary site where they can find out more information specifically about our certification is generation-youth.com. So they can go there as well and find out the information. And there's emails available at all those sites, but it's real easy to find me, james@generationziegler.com. They can just email me there. We're on Generation Youth is on all the major social platforms. You can find me on LinkedIn, obviously. Instagram is where we'll probably land more as an organization than any of the others. So we want to be involved with it. We want you to connect with us because of the free summits that we do, where speakers will share if you're interested in our world of youth development and helping youth in the crisis that they're in overcome and have those tools. We want you to connect with us so you can hear us as well. And you can find our podcast also at those locations too.
I love that. James, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.